quick. All right, so the first part is to show you I'll spend about maybe 10-15 minutes to show you the basics of the maps and probably some unique ways to get to data that you might be looking for here and there, but then I really want to spend time on some of the advanced features. So the map, if you're not familiar, it's really simple. It's fully interactive. You can click and drag the map around. You can zoom in and out. It's all basic stuff, right? The location bar on the top works like a Google search bar where you're typing in an address or a city or a zip code or so. What's a zip code I can go to for you guys?
49512.
And so this is a really neat introduction to boundaries a little bit. If you're not familiar with boundaries in the census concept, the census and the post office are two different federal divisions. And so because of that, the zip codes don't always fully contain census boundaries. And that's why we have a thing called a ZICTA, which is a zip code tabulation area. So it's a census that created a zip code equivalent. And the only reason for that is because so many people use zip codes that and the data never aggregated up to it correctly, so the census created their own version of it. And it's very, very close in its approximation of a zip code. But once you get to the place, then the next step is really adding data, and that data is available from these tabs in the very top. If you want to get a general sense of what data is available in these categories, because there's a lot of information you're going to dig in here. There's a link in the very top here that says data directory. I'll send you this link in our follow-up email, but this page is our kind of a directory that summarizes the different categories you're going to see when you go into the tool. And basically the way it works is if you scroll down, eventually you'll get to the table of contents, which mimics the categories that we just looked at. And then from here, let's say if you want to find something very simple, like maybe quality of life in a given area, it'll tell you that in this category of quality of life, you'll find grocery retail locations, SNAP locations, brownfields, libraries and such. Then you start getting to data like crime data, incarceration, how people get to work, computer access. So and for us, quality of life are indicators that generally make a community or can affect a community, positive or negative. But if we go to the category of quality of life, you're going to see it's really deep. And there's a lot of very specific ways that data is shown in here. And that's the reason why I try to take us to the data directory page, just to give you a to start from. There's two really important things about the data in policy map. Just to, if you're not familiar, we have two types of data. The first is what we call a point data set. So these are what are basically addresses. So for us, a point data set is an address data set. So when you upload data as students, those are going to be points on the maps for us. And then the rest of the data is what we call a data layer. And so what you're going to find, just real quick, is that the first submenu for most of our categories are what we call our point data sets. And just kind of an easy way to remember that. And then the rest of this is what we call a data layer. So layer data is the aggregate data, meaning that the data is summarized to geographies. And then you get these colorful maps and beautiful maps that you're probably familiar with when it comes to policy map. Points and layers have their own legends. And then that way we'll talk a little bit about the legends and some of the cool things you can do about customizing the legends for data when you add. But I always want to make that distinction of the two types of data in the tool.
I guess that's one of the things that I get confused about, Phil, is if you want to look up 2 or 3 different topics at the same time, how you layered them.
Yep.
I know how you picked one, but yeah, how you layer them is great to know too.
Yep. Yeah. So that's the multi-layers, and we'll definitely jump to that because I think that's what you're trying to do is start overlaying some of these really neat indicators that you've seen one at a time, but now you want to see how they affect each other in that given area. Just a really quick thing that's helpful in general is that we do have a lot of data, and the data directory helps you give you an idea of what you're going to find within some of these places. But sometimes you just want to get the data without having to dig through these different categories in general. And you can use the other search bar on the left then, and that's a data search. So in this case, if you're looking for, let's say, persons of Hispanic origins, you can type in some very simple keywords, and then it'll generally find some really odd ones. So first, the problem with those is like you're going to get the most popular indicators in the very top, which for us is the HMDA data, because we are a banking company in a sense. So there's a lot of data here related to Hispanics. Well, eventually we'll get to something else. You can also look for, I believe, 5 to 9 age groups.
Well, wait, yeah, I thought there was a tab you hit that you pulled down and it had, do you want it by demographics, by age, by...
Yes. Yeah, the
Yeah,
demographic
okay,
tab is
got it.
probably going to be the best tab for you to look at when it comes to just looking at people in general,
Okay.
because this will give you some basic stuff like population, racial characteristics, as well as ethnicity.
Okay.
There's some really neat data sets related to diversity. So one of the challenges that I think a lot of users, when they use the census data, is the census wants you to look at one race at a time. And maybe in this case, they started grouping a handful of races together, like some races and two or more races. But a lot of times you really want to see how all the races the census reports are mixed together. And so we created a layer called predominant race, as well as some of these really neat diversity layers. And what this does is, instead of seeing one individual race at a time, this will show you the predominant race of each census tract or geography that we're in. So in this example, anything in the blue are tracts that are predominantly white, and then green is black, and then orange is Hispanic. So if you know Grand Rapids, you probably definitely understand the segregation that occurs in the downtown area pretty well there.
Yeah, if you think about it.
Yeah, we have this pretty definitive line in Philadelphia as well for neighborhoods. So this is a really neat map. Some of these layers you probably are very familiar with, just understanding the neighborhoods, but some of the layers are really neat are these ones that are the light colors in between. Because what you get is, while it's, in this case, it's predominantly white, it's not the majority. So it's a neat understanding of a little bit of mixture of how geographies are changing over year to year sometimes, or at least trending.
Sorry, how did you get to that again?
Sure. So it's under race, ethnicity, and predominant race.
Demographics,
Okay.
race, ethnicity, and predominant race.
Yeah, and you can just type in predominant up here as well, or even race, I believe it should pull up. Yeah, and then, I mean, there's other really neat ways to look at diversity and segregation in these areas. There were some indexes that we created that were pulled from academic studies. So the Thiel index is this really neat one that says so one of the neat things about data and policy map is that we get really wonky here. And if you want to understand where the data comes from, while the title tells you what this means, the little eye icon in the legend will give you a longer, much helpful explanation. So I think this is the Thiel index, which is saying evenly. No, this is a different one. Hold on. It's a very similar study, but it's the diversity index. Is the probability of two or more individuals that are chosen randomly would be different races or ethnicity. So this is a study that we pulled from an academic that did this.
Well, Phil, a lot of what we look at are trends. So is there a way on one map to show, demographic changes, like, or do you have to print different maps, like people are moving out of the city, or, the Spanish section was over here and now it's farther away from the school, or is there a way to show trends on one map, or is it just a date point in time?
Yeah, so that's the neat thing about the legend for any of the data and policy maps, that you can initially it'll default to what we call a variable. In this case, it's the percentage of persons that are Hispanic. And then what you'll get is in the variable options to see either the number of persons that are Hispanic, and then as you're looking for, which is the percent change of number of persons that are Hispanic. So either a 20-year change or a 5-year change in this. And majority of the race ethnicity indicators always have a percent change calculation. So that way you have a baseline to choose from. And we'll have the 2020 comparison in here. It should have been done last week. We're having some data computation issues for the comparisons, but we should have it up this week for everyone to look at.
That's never happened here. Complications.
So in this case, what you'll get is the percent change between the 5 years that the census allows you to compare against itself. And so what you'll have is the dark purples that are an increase of 80% or more, the dark oranges, or a decrease of 30% or less in this case. So then you can start seeing the neighborhoods that are growing in population of Hispanic population, on the other side of that coin decreasing.
Cool, very cool. That really helps our.
The neat thing is, if you want to simplify this map, which is probably one of the most important features that you're looking for, is while you have a lot of data and it's neat to be able to see this, you probably want very specific cut points because you're looking for very specific either growth or increase or even races. Use the edit range function in the legend. and this will release the field, and you can start seeing where this histogram is sometimes helpful, but also not as helpful, because you can see what you get is, while majority of the data is has a growth of almost 6,000% somewhere. So there's a tract somewhere in the U.S. that has a growth of Hispanic population of 6,000%. You'll see that the histogram is showing you that if you zoom in on your own map, you'll see that the number of places that actually have tracts that have growth or decrease is very slim. It's within this, like, I believe 3% to 150% at the most. And so this edit function allows you to make your own cut points then, meaning that if you wanted to find places that have that have no growth, and then to maybe a that has no growth to maybe negative 50%, you're simplifying the map to see where the largest places have a decrease of Hispanic population occurred, where places that have no growth at all.
Sorry.
So then you start understanding the neighborhoods that you're looking at in this case, where there's 100% decrease in Hispanic population.
This is on.
Yeah, so the ability to change the variable is very helpful, because it's just trying to get to what you're looking for, which is starting to see these trends across different years. But being able to make your own cut points really simplifies the map for your research, because now you just quickly identify just these neighborhoods that hit the highest decrease in this case.
Can you show us the same thing with age groups, with like ages 5 to 9, so we can see the kindergarten trend and see?
Yep, so in the case of age, same thing, it defaults to percentage. That's kind of a basic rule for us. So from this, then you want to go to either a 5-year or 10-year change, or 20-year change. And then what we get then, the dark purples are an increase of 30% or more. The light purples are a decrease of, or the dark oranges a decrease of 33% or less. And then again,
That's where River City is.
Schools are.
Look at that, wow. Wow. Yeah.
There's so rich part.
So the
Even
dark
Walker.
purple is the growth?
Yeah.
Change growth.
increase.
Got it.
So is Granville young or old? I apologize for my ignorance.
Granville's
Granville?
Is getting
The
older.
orange
is getting older.
It's getting
Purple.
older.
getting older now.
Okay.
So what's that dark purple like? What
That
is that?
huge section of dark
increase.
purple would mean that
Where
they're
is
getting
that?
younger.
Purple means growth.
No, but where
Growth.
is that?
Yep.
That's like Coopersville.
Ah, really? Everybody's moving out of the city. Okay.
A little bit to the east.
No, Coopersville's up north of
No,
Walker.
oh, you're right. That's Walker.
Yeah.
That's small. So
What's
it's
that
below it.
there? Would
The
be,
west
That would be
side.
like Hudsonville, Janet, right?
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think
No.
it's up by the zoo.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's the west
Which-
side.
The
Sorry, Phil, we're trying to figure out where the kids are.
We automatically
Schools
go
are
into recruiting. Yeah, we're thinking too wide. That's
Tina now has a team of 12.
Yeah. Okay. It's good to know, so,
I
okay.
can bust them in from the
That's the,
suburbs.
okay.
All right,
I
so
wonder what it
this is the
show us about. Oh, go ahead, Phil.
All right, so let's show you. So now you kind of understand the basics of the legend. Just understand, remember, the legend is a huge tool that you can do some really neat ways to change how that data is displayed by the variable, the ranges, which are very helpful, of course, even years. So you can even see different points of times. But now maybe you want to see these two layers together. So maybe you want to see where there are a decrease of 5 to 9-year-olds and a concentration of growth of Hispanic population. Are those two things somewhere merging together when you can be overlapping? And that's where the multi-layer feature comes in. So understand that the way the single layer tool works is that it's trying to show you multiple colors, and each color represents different ranges of that one layer. When you switch to multi-layer, then it's going to show you one color, and that one color then it's up to you to determine the initial color. So in this case, the range starts at a decrease of 100% to an increase of over almost 2,500%. So there's some track in the US that has that growth of 5 to 9-year-olds. So what's a good range of, are you looking for growth or decrease?
How about decrease to 5 to 9-year-olds? Let's look at that.
All right. So let's say we do, how about 0%? So we see places that have no growth.
Okay.
The whole city is purple.
So then what you'll get is only the places that have no growth at all. So either a decrease or 0% growth. And we can move this number down. So if you want to say, we can bring this down maybe negative 20%, 25%, so a quarter of the.
Yeah, basically where your schools are.
Yeah.
So now what you get is a map that shows one layer, and that one layer is specifically showing. Sorry, I need to change this one more. This is different. Oh yeah, it is percent change. All right. So one layer showing a decrease of 25% of 5 to 9-year-olds. So let's do the next one, which is Hispanic population. And so again,
Right, and I apologize because you went fast. So you have the multi-layer on. Oh, you just clicked add layer?
layer.
Okay, got it.
yeah,
Thank
or
you.
just go right to the top and add a data layer from the very top. So in the case of Hispanic, the default is percentage of persons with Hispanic. And again, you want to get this to the layer that you're looking for. In this case, it's the percent change. And so we change this to percent change. And now what we get is this is still 100% of the Hispanic growth population, but we're still contained within the first layer, which is 5 to 9-year-old growth, a decrease of 25%. So same situation here. Maybe we are looking for an increase of population. So maybe it's 50%. So now these are two tracks that have an increase of Hispanic population, while a decrease of 5 to 9-year-old.
Wow, that's interesting.
So you're seeing how those two things merge together. Or if you want to see the flip side of that and see, are there a correlation between a decrease of 5 to 9-year-old and a decrease of Hispanic population?
Yeah, let's do that.
And so this is the same way. We'll do negative 25 one more time. So these are where these two data sets merge together. And so understand that the way this query is being done, it's not the same data that it's querying against, it's just the overlap of these data sets. So you're not finding tracks that have 5 to 9-year-old that are decreasing and Hispanics that are decreasing. It just happens that these two layers where they overlap for those values.
No, Phil, did you say that this is not the 2020 census data?
Not at this time. We should have the 2020 census data probably in this week. So when you do this, you'll have the same options where the percent change calculations will have. It'll actually probably have, I believe, two more options for change. So you can do a 5-year change, a 10-year change, a 20-year change in calculation.
Okay. So this technically then would be data from 2000, if we did a 5-year change, 2005 to 2010.
Well, in this particular comparison, it's the 2020 ACS versus the 2015 ACS, American Community Survey. So the two year-to-year yearly census variables.
Okay, that's confusing because didn't you just say you don't have the 2020 information in
Well,
there?
but this is
Is this a different data source?
Yeah, so the census does two census. The big one is the decennial census that we all remember, and then year to year they do the American Community Survey, which is really neat because it basically gives you year-to-year updates. And so they published it, this one 2020, and then the census only allows you to compare it based on the 5 years that they do the rolling estimates again. So they published it 2020, and so we can only compare it against the 2015 ACS.
So Phil, what about total population, density? Like if you want to take a look at, I was thinking like Lansing, right? Do we see if the area around where the school is, if 5 years ago it was dense, I mean, total population, or guys, do we only care about kid population? Really, is it?
I think we care about kid population.
Okay.
Because I'm just going to use, let's say you were to look at a part of North Carolina, and because retirement boom.
Oh,
we don't care about
yeah.
population
Right,
increase there.
right.
We just care about kiddos.
Kid population. Okay. Yeah, then that answers my question. Okay.
So the last thing I just want to cover when it regards to the multi-layer map, you can add another layer. So if you did want to add something like density, population density, which is underpopulation, you can do total population density. And then in this case, you can see that this is by rate, and it's only by rate. So you're looking for something very simple like 1,000% or 100%. Yeah, that's not a lot. Hold on. Wow. Oh, You're very dense in your neighborhoods. That's great. All right, so we'll bring this up to 8,000. So we didn't really remove too much, but what you're seeing is it's the combination of all three. So we can adjust this number if you're looking for very concentrated neighborhoods or not. So these are 3 layers that intersect with each other. And the way this function works is what we call an AND function. So the AND function is the overlap of these 3 layers. And so it's only showing you places that meet all 3 criteria. And the goal of this is to give you the ability to identify places that you're trying to look for that match maybe some very specific criteria when it comes to looking at neighborhoods. But sometimes you want to find out what's going on the edges, what's around the neighborhoods. And so the overlap allows you to start seeing how the data looks outside of these exact matches. And so what this will give you is sometimes a scary map because it's a little messy.
Oh, that is.
But what you'll get, though, is you'll start understanding that this place here matches 2 criteria of Hispanic population and density, but it didn't match our 5 to 9 year old data, whereas this matches the 2 in this case. So this is meets our density range, but at the same time meets our 5 to 9 range.
Nothing has all 3.
It'd be really great for.
And then you start finding places that have none of it, and maybe you have a better understanding of those neighborhoods. Why, in this case, it didn't match any of them.
Right there.
There are 2 spots that I see.
Yeah. So
What about export? Bill, if we wanted to export this, or how do you do that, or print it, or how do we get this information in a presentation of you?
Yeah. So the print icon, which I know I just skipped really quick, but it's this guy in the bottom right here. So this little print icon allows you to export the map.
Okay.
And then this will give you a chance to, they'll give you all the details in the legend. It'll give you a chance to give it a title. So if you're presenting it in a program or a specific paper or research, you can add it there. You can do a little bit of customization, change the orientation, the formats and such.
Nice.
And it'll download right onto your desktop.
Okay.
Yeah, so the multi-layer maps is neat. It'll give you some really neat ways to do it. It can feel overwhelming at first, so I always tell users, go into it with indicators that you're familiar with, something very simple like income and maybe age, and start playing with the variables. It'll initially default to the AND function, so it'll be an easy way for you to adjust the numbers back and forth and such. And then once you get comfortable with a couple, you'll understand better how to add another one. And then from there, you can start flipping over to the overlap, which will really start telling you unique stories around the neighborhoods of the area. It's a lot of data that you can interact with, so don't feel like you have to jump into all these categories. There's a lot of categories that you're probably never going to get into because your focus is really specific in your work. But there are some really neat data sets to use as well.
What about importing, Phil? If we wanted to import students, again, new students at a school or students that didn't show up, that applied and never showed up, if we wanted to import some data to see if they came from someplace, how do we import it? How does Abby import it?
So there's a couple different ways. The first is probably through the data loader, which allows you to upload your own spreadsheets of addresses into the tool. And then from there, you can visualize those addresses as points in the map. The one unfortunate thing I have to explain is that the data loader is only available in our legacy version right now because we're finishing it currently for the new version. So the good news is if you load it in the legacy, it'll be available in the new version for you to use and make these maps you're working on, and it'll also be available once we finish everything. So you're not losing anything.
Everything. Okay, good. So everything you've made already, it will go over into the new.
Yes. Yeah. Nothing will be lost that you make in legacy at any time. Yeah.
All
Do we
right.
have to pay more for
literally just
legacy?
started sweating.
Do we have a legacy subscription or no?
Yeah, it's the same.
Okay.
So you'll just toggle back and forth with the link in the very top here. It says go to PolicyMap Legacy. And it's basically the same interface. It's just a little older looking. We've been doing this upgrade for the last 2.5 years, and it's more about infrastructure and technology that we've been doing this. And the data loader is up here. So the data loader is actually on the new version of PolicyMap. It's just that it tells you it's not available at the time. So the data loader is just that. It's a very simple address-based data loading tool. There's a couple different ways to add data to the map. You can add points to the maps, but we're going to use the spreadsheet function. It'll walk you through the steps of uploading data. See, I do this a lot, so let's just put one of these up here. So initially, the myself only means that only your login has access to this data. And the way we transfer data, it allows us to be HIPAA compliant as well. So the privacy of the data is pretty secure in that function. When or if you choose to share data, and there's some really neat ways to share it, you can share it with your colleagues in this process. It will break any kind of privacy rules that you are worried about in this case. So just understand that if you choose to share it, you can share it internally, and that's the selected individuals, and that I don't know how that affects your rules in regards to privacy for data, but it does mean that only these people that you choose to share will have access. But myself only means that only you have access to that until you choose otherwise. And I'll show you this when we come back to this in a moment. So you can choose different icons, different shapes, different colors, and that's it. So this is the hardest part in uploading data, setting up this file right here. Just kidding. The hardest part is actually the file itself. Because you have to choose, you have to choose what you want to upload. And so the way our data loader is, it is an address-based data loading tool only. I don't think you are working with data that's at geographies at this time. If you do, good news is you'll probably be able to do it fairly soon. But for now, if you have addresses of students, which is I think what you're trying to approach, then you're going to use this tool here. The only thing we need in your file then is the address, city, state, and zip combination. And that's it. So if you want to upload student data and have no information about the students, you can just simply upload the address, city, state, and then break it up by the categories that you're trying to identify as. Students that don't show up, students that are no longer in your database, then you'll have different sets of data that you can look at visually once at a time. If you choose to add information, you can anonymize the data for the students if you wanted to, or you can add just general information about them. So the rest of the columns here are dynamic up to how and what you want to add to the tool. But the only thing we need is the address, city, state, and zip.
Okay.
Now, there is a limit per file at this time. It's because the way the data loader works, we are doing some upgrades to it. But for now, each file can only have 5,000 addresses.
Carol, that might not work for you. Don't have 5,000.
I think we're good.
Okay. If you do have more than 5,000, you can just break it up into chunks of 5,000. And the actual increase of this will be back to 20,000 when I get done with the upgrade. And then the last thing is, if you do save it, make sure you save it as a CSV. It'll tell you in your file format when you close and save out. Save it as a CSV file or comma separated value. And then from this.
This is how I got all the school addresses. I didn't write it down myself.
I have a whole tutorial for this, so you don't have to. You can do this on your own as well. So once you do that, it'll initially try to identify that it's address, city, state, and zip combination that we just talked about. If for whatever reason one of these isn't up here and you label it differently in your database, it'll be down here, and this is your chance to say this should have been state, this should have been zip code, and so forth.
Okay.
And then when you click next, all it basically does is it uploads the data to our infrastructure, it geocodes everything, and then re-downloads it onto your desktop and basically recreates the spreadsheet. And then you'll get some tips in the very top. So the tips is going to tell you some really important things. One of the most important things is the match rate. So in this example, it's telling us that of my 128 addresses, 120 were found. A lot of different reasons occur when it comes to not finding an address. I'll talk about that in a moment. The columns are sortable, just like an Excel spreadsheet. And the first column is probably the most important one because the greens are the ones that were found and the reds are the ones that failed. You can group them together and then see all the ones that failed. And some common mistakes when it comes to geocoding are things like cross streets, which I don't think you guys have too much of this face. But you can edit the address while you're here. And it'll geocode the addresses on the fly. Another more common mistake is missing street numbers, of course. It's been so long since I've been there, I just forgot my address there. And then when you're done, click Save and Close. So There are other ways to fix this, and also it's what we call hand geocoding. It's a very laborious task to try and define the exact geocodes for these places, and I can get into those at a later date. But when you're
We
done,
won't care enough for that.
No.
we
The
have
majority.
we have a really good geocoder. We probably have one of the better ones that are in the industry. Our match rate is about 80 to 85% for a starting file, and then 90-95% for like a really cleaned up file sometimes. So it's fairly good when you're talking about geocoding. But basically, we've gone from a spreadsheet on our desktop to being able to visualize those points on the map and all the
Phil,
data.
this may sound a silly question, but does it match commemorative street names?
It
Or official?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure. It should, because I do have street names in this file under things like Martin Luther King Drive, which is a different road in Philadelphia. So I'm not sure. I can check on that for you.
Well, the reason I ask is the Martin Luther King addresses used to never match in another mapping system, and I never thought about it. And I saw a news thing this morning that Grand Rapids is going to officially convert commemorative names to official names, and I thought maybe that's why it never picked it up.
Right,
So,
right.
That's a really good question. Well, I mean, so our geocoding database is based off of mailing addresses. So it probably does capture commemorative streets, because I believe that database captures both.
You get your mail on it, yeah, okay.
I will confirm that for you. It's a great question. I've never had it asked. So
It's
once you
not
have it
either.
here, then there's a couple of really important things of the file itself. The goal of this page really is to visualize the data, but just some important pages on this is that if you choose to share this data, and again, this is one of the really neat ways that if you wanted to make this collaborative to everybody within the group, there's two ways to share it. Selected individuals means that you can identify each person that would have access to this data set. And at any time, you can add and remove those persons. So that way, only you and those persons will have access to this particular data set. There are ways to share data sets publicly. I don't know if you're going to go that route, but the public shareable function allows you to do that as well.
Yeah.
The other important part about sharing is that you can also share different parts of the data itself, because we understand you're sharing data. And again, it's up to you how you want to do this. But when you do choose to share the data, either with individuals or publicly, edit points initially will reopen that table that we looked at initially. And then the secondary tab up here, the set access to fields, will give you the ability to turn off and on fields that you want to share with those persons. So this is really, we built this tool for a couple of different ways that academics share this data. But in this case, if you want to have everything on, you can turn off those fields for users at the same time. All right, so that's the data loader. Pretty straightforward. I do have a full tutorial on this, so if you wanted to go back to this, but again, the really biggest part is this file, is setting up the file, and all you really need is the address, city, state, and zip combination to make sure that it works.
So now, is there a way, like Sherry was saying, that we can take now this data loader and take a different set of addresses and pile them on top of each other? So say we've got from 2018, X amount of kids that left the school, and now we want to know 2020, how many kids left the school. Is there any way to overlap that?
Yes, great question. It's a great way to lead me into our next part then. So let's go. So yes, so the goal of the data loader for you is to really load as much data as you want to start visualizing that data. But once you want to use it, then you are able to access that data. So we can do this in the new version of Policy. I'll do that just so we have some context. But you can do it in the legacy version as well.
I took a picture of it to make out get them too.
Oh my God, these are the Amazon guys.
So any data sets that you've uploaded will be available in the My Data tab in the top left. And data sets that were shared with you, I apologize, I do have to go to Legacy because this is not currently, this will be turned on this week as well. Any data sets that are created are available in the My Data tab. any data sets that are shared with you from other users are also available in the middle column, which will be the same thing in the new version of Policy Map. And so the middle column are people that create a data set, they selected individual, and then they put me as the person they shared with. And so things like Betsy and Maggie and such. And I take this here because there's a really neat data set that definitely illustrates what you're trying to do, which is overlaying multiple point data sets, but using different icons, different sizes to show different values of that point data set. So DCED is an organization in Pennsylvania. They're the Department of Community Economic Development. They work with the governor's office with small businesses to help them succeed. And what they wanted to do is be able to visualize some of the small businesses in the areas. And so they created a handful of different indicators. And the first is the individual businesses that they support. And so this is the current year for them. And then what they did was they wanted to see different years of that effect. And so they created 2 data sets. So the smaller stars in this case represented investments that were done in a prior administration, and the larger stars were investments that are at the current administration. And then they also created another category by saying the effect of the investments by using a different color at that time. So now they can use different colors. So in your example, then you can definitely just break up your student population into these varying categories and be able to display them individually or together at the same time on the maps to visualize.
So this was created basically by importing information and giving it these parameters, like blue star,
That's
orange
correct.
star, red star, and then you're just choosing the different things you've already imported to layer them in at different times.
That's correct. Yeah, this is generally what we call a filter in Policy Map. The data loader at this time doesn't have the filter function. So the benefit is you can just make your own filters by taking your entire database and figuring out what you want to filter by, be it ranges of years, be it very specific categories of prior students, current students, demographics if you wanted to. So all those things, you can just make a handful or a really good collection of different types of data sets to choose.
Okay.
And then the last thing that we're here then is, let's go to the new version of Policy Map. So probably one of the most important things as well is you're probably trying to collect data for the students as well that you have. So if you do have data that's uploaded into Policy Map and you want to start collecting data for maybe the zip code that the students are living in, or maybe the even more detailed data like tracks and block groups, then you can what we call join data to a point data set, meaning you can take your uploaded point data set and join it to any of the data sets that we just talked about individually. So are they in areas that are increase or decrease of age groups? Are they in areas that are low income, living in poverty, high poverty of those areas and such? So the way it works is that you want to have the data on the map, your point data set first, and then add any of the layer data that you want to join it to. So let's do something, I'm going to do something simple, and we'll say how many of my points are in areas of families in poverty in this case. So there's 2 ways to get to this download function. The first in the legacy version is actually the download button. But in the case of the new version of Policy Map, it's in this really odd bubble here in the very top. And the reason for this is that you need to make a containment of the area you want to download for, meaning that if I were to start here with just my 2 layers of data, and I want to get data just for Grand Rapids or just for Pennsylvania or just for Philadelphia, I need to define the containment in the very top. So just use the search bar basically to define the area you want to download for. And then you'll get this little option here that shows you initially the data of the area that you're looking for, but also these little buttons that shows you things like you can download data for the area, you can download data for a report, but you can also see it in a table, which links it to the download function on the top right. It's a little confusing to get from this page. There's an easier way to go from the legacy as well, but from this page here, what you'll get is the ability to download either all of the data layer, which is persons in poverty or families in poverty, your points, which is the points you uploaded already, or the combination of those 2. So now you're joining these 2 things together, and you're going to get a list of all the addresses you've uploaded, joined to, in this case, the counties, but we don't want the counties. We want to get a smaller geography. So we can select this and say, I want to get zip codes that each address sits in. So what this will give me is a list of all my students that I've uploaded, join them to the zip code that they're in, and in this case, this is emailed to you. This one is a really specific and unique download.
That's sad. I wish there were Oh, this is in Poverty. Look at Cleveland.
Sorry about that. Let's get my email. And so this will give me all of my addresses, all my data, which is for us, for my file was just a public library data set. But in this case, the zip code that each address sits in, and then the percentage of families in those addresses that are in poverty. So what we did was we joined our point data set, which could be your students, to any of the layer data that you're trying to identify with them, be it growth of population, income, any of the other health indicators. You can join pretty much any data set that's in PolicyMap with this function.
Phil, one of our marketing teammates is also on the call because they use this as well. And the question was, how many, because there's so many managers, how many sign-ins or logins or how many logins, I guess, do we have?
Yeah, I have to check. I believe, I'm not sure. I have to look it up, but I believe it's either 5 or 10 in your group, but they're interchangeable.
Okay.
So that way, if someone's not using it at a certain time, for a certain period, we can swap out users at any time.
Okay, so if we got it to Abby, she could update the quote users and the folks that we're using. Okay.
Our old one doesn't work anymore.
I don't think our old one doesn't work anymore because we got it under
I
Abby,
switched
but
it to my email that's
Yeah.
on the account.
Emily will need a separate one.
Mhm.
And then the password, did you just say, is it capital A?
I'm gonna have to look at my email.
Okay.
I have it there somewhere.
I know it's admissions, I just don't know if it's-
How about questions, other
Yeah.
ideas? I don't know, Emily, if you have any specifics.
Can you go back to that one map? You can pick whatever city you want. How do you find all the different colors of the different, I've been messing with it and I can't find it.
Sure.
Different colors of
The population and race and ethnicity.
Yeah. So that layer is under demographics,
Yeah.
race, ethnicity. And I apologize if you do type in predominant, it should be there.
But mine is being, okay.
And so this will give you that map that are predominant race.
Wow,
Oh, it should be updated soon.
I like how insufficient data.
Phil, for a given area, this is showing the predominant race. Is there a way to find out like what the secondary, the third, the tertiary, like what's
That's a
like
good
this
question.
is just the
No,
predominant?
I agree. That's a really great question. It's something that we are planning to do in the future because, as you can see, the data for this is the 2-year ago calculation. So we do have a 2020 update to this tied with the 2020 census. It is something that we do want to add to this info bubble in the future, which is you can start seeing the secondary and the third prominent races and why it makes up in that process. Yeah, there really isn't a way to do this clean. The only other way is to basically have to go through these individual races, unfortunately.
Okay.
So I think some of our managers might use some of this data with, they have year-end reports coming up. Could you let us know or email when the 2020 data is in?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
And then probably
Is
the
there
last
anything that, oh, go ahead, Phil.
so it does sound like you are looking to try and maybe get bigger pictures of a given place without having to go to one layer at a time or one data set at a time. So you can always use the report function in the very top right-hand corner here. And this allows you to basically make a predefined report of any given area. And that given area can be a geography like a city or a county. You can do a custom region, which is a custom boundary that you did, or you can do a radius around an address and such. And the reports are specific to the type of data you're trying to collect. The community profile report is probably the most unique one that you can use because this will give you all the demographics of that given area, population, race, income, and then characteristics about the community, so housing and crime and such. There are other ones. There's a health data that's really unique as well. So we do something simple like we go to Grand Rapids.
Well, do Lansing for us, if you would.
Got
Just
it.
for the heck of it. Okay.
I have so much homelessness there this year. Yeah. Interesting to see.
And so what this will do is give you initially some basic information about the area, congressional districts, senatorial, legislative districts, but then the demographics. So the population was in 2000, what it is in 2010, what it is in the current ACS, what it will have in the 2020 census in here, the demographics of that place, the change across those times, age groups.
Oh, yeah, that's nice. So that's
I
a
know,
report
right?
function on the top right.
Yeah, so it's the report feature on the top right. Yeah, so once I heard marketing, I figured this is what you guys would really benefit from. In the case of these reports, they can also do custom boundaries. So if you're trying to get a radius around a school, you can basically type in that school's address, do a 5-mile radius, and it'll aggregate the data for that radius.
Perfect. That's just what I was going to ask. How small of a radius can we go?
It's based on the data. So I can type in an address. Let's give me an address, and we can zoom in.
300 Expressway Court, Lansing.
33.
Yeah, 3300 Expressway Court.
You got it. What's the zip code on
And do
that?
a
Was that Lansing? That's fine.
That's Lansing. 491. You have Lansing, you have Mystery.
Oh, 48910.
Here we go. You said 5 miles?
Correct. Is
We
it?
go, you can go smaller if you want. We have many users that go half mile and 1 mile. We do something simple. So you can adjust this. So if it's 1 mile, it's 3 miles. And then what this will do is it'll aggregate the geographies that are inside the radius, and it'll tell you what geographies are used. In this case, it's using tracks. So from this, you can see the population, 2000, 2010, the current ACS, the trend across that, demographics, the age groups.
Okay, so many kids to choose from.
And you can
Wow,
download
okay.
this into.
That is really helpful. Like, that's the thing I might use the most. That's what I was going to ask. Other than the report function, is what do your other customers in marketing use? Is there a tool, something else that we might want to know about?
Yeah, so the two big things I showed you is the report and the ability to join data. So that uploading your data and then joining it to pieces of data they're looking for. So the download function that I showed. Those are probably the two main features that marketing teams use. The report's neat because it gives you this really neat snapshot of people in a given area really quickly without doing too much. And then the downloading function allows you to specifically join data to current customers or current addresses, and then joining it to whatever variables you're looking for, depending on what research you're applying to those addresses.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, good. Well, I have guides and tutorials that will walk you through these in much more simpler terms. So that way, if you wanted to do the report on your own, you'll be able to walk through fairly quickly to understand the reports and how to do it as well.
Okay. Is that something I would just email you for?
I'll send it in a follow-up email with the video. So I'll give you all the links in that email. You can share with everyone.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great.
If you do want to search for your own, you can always follow the support link in the very top as well.
Okay. We'll figure out the login information, how many and who, and
Any other questions?
no, this is awesome.
Thank you so much for
Yeah,
your
awesome, Phil.
time.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much for learning about the tool. If you do have any questions about what you're doing, if you run into a situation where you're like, I don't understand what Phil said, email me at any time. We're all a bunch of data nerds. We love talking about data and how to apply it to things. And so, yeah, we're happy to answer questions anytime.
If you could have that 2020 data loaded by the 1st of November, because that's when our marketing plan meetings are, it would be really helpful.
It'll be done by this week. I'm very surprised that we didn't get it. We were supposed to be done by October, the beginning of October, but we had a huge tabular issue with the geographies.
Way to go, Phil.
Yeah.
Yeah, this week I think it should be done. I think that's our update to it.
Awesome.
Good deal. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank you.
again.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Phil.
Bye.
Thank you.